Welcome to the dark corners of the internet, where nightmares come alive and shadows whisper secrets. Turn off the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for a story that will keep you up all night. This is the Haunting of Hollow Creek. Hollow Creek was a town shrouded in mist and mystery, a place where time seemed to stand still and where the old and forgotten lingered. It was nestled deep in the forest, away from the bustling cities, and the townspeople liked it that way. They spoke in hushed tones about the past, about the old manor on the hill, and about the tragedies that had befallen their quiet town. But it wasn't until Sarah Thompson moved in that the haunting truly began. Sarah was a writer, seeking solitude and inspiration. She had inherited the Hollow Creek Manor from a distant relative she barely remembered, and she saw it as the perfect opportunity to escape the noise of her life in the city. The manor was grand, but decayed, with ivy creeping up the walls and windows that looked out over the foggy landscape. It had been abandoned for years, and the townspeople avoided it, whispering about curses and ghosts. On her first night in the manor, Sarah explored its many rooms, brushing away cobwebs and dust. She marveled at the antique furniture, the grand staircase, and the long hallways that seemed to stretch into darkness. As she wandered, she felt a chill in the air, as if the house was holding its breath. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice echoing through the empty halls. "Is anyone here?" There was no response, just the creaking of the old floorboards beneath her feet. She shook her head, laughing at her own nervousness. "It's just an old house," she told herself. "Nothing to be afraid of." But that night, as she lay in bed, she heard it. The soft, mournful wailing of a woman. Sarah sat up, her heart pounding. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. She got out of bed and followed the sound, her steps tentative and slow. The wailing led her to a room at the end of the hallway, a room she hadn't noticed before. The door creaked open, revealing a nursery, untouched by time. A rocking chair moved gently back and forth, as if pushed by an invisible hand. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She stepped into the room, her eyes scanning for any sign of what could be making the noise. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why are you crying?" The wailing stopped, replaced by a soft whisper. "Help me!" Sarah froze. The voice was close, too close. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with fear. There was no one there, just the rocking chair and the empty crib. She backed out of the room, her heart racing, and fled back to her bedroom, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, Sarah went into town, determined to find out more about the manor's history. She visited the local library, poring over old newspapers and records. She learned that the manor had once belonged to the Whitmore family, a wealthy but ill-fated clan. The last owner, Elizabeth Whitmore, had gone mad after the mysterious death of her infant daughter, Clara. Elizabeth had claimed that the house was haunted, that she could hear her daughter's cries at night. She had died shortly after, under suspicious circumstances. "Excuse me," Sarah said to the librarian, a kind-looking woman with silver hair. "Do you know anything about the Whitmore family, or the hauntings at the manor?" The librarian looked around nervously before leaning in. The Whitmore tragedy is something the town doesn't like to talk about. But yes, there have been stories of hauntings. People hear cries, whispers, and some have even seen apparitions. Most people stay away from that place. Sarah thanked the librarian and left, her mind buzzing with questions. That night, she returned to the nursery, determined to uncover the truth. She sat in the rocking chair, the room silent and still. "Elizabeth, Clara, if you're here, please talk to me. I want to help." For a moment, there was nothing. Then, the temperature dropped, and a faint, ghostly figure appeared by the crib. A woman in a white dress, her face pale and sorrowful. "You can see me?" the apparition whispered. "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice shaking. "I'm here to help. What happened to you?" Elizabeth's spirit seemed to waver, her eyes filled with despair. "My daughter, she was taken from me, not by death, but by darkness. A malevolent spirit bound to this house. It took her, and in my grief, I couldn't save her." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "How can I free her? How can I free you both?" Elizabeth pointed to a hidden compartment in the crib. Sarah opened it and found an old, dusty journal. "The answers are in there," Elizabeth said. "But beware, the spirit will not let her go easily." Sarah spent the next few days reading the journal, learning about the dark entity that haunted the manor. It was a spirit of vengeance, bound to the house by a curse. To break the curse, she needed to perform a ritual, using items that were significant to the Whitmore family. On the night of the ritual, Sarah gathered the items: a locket with Clara's picture, a strand of Elizabeth's hair, and a silver candlestick. She placed them in the nursery, drawing a circle of salt around her. As she began to recite the incantation from the journal, the house seemed to come alive, the walls trembling and the air growing thick with malevolence. "You cannot have her!" a deep, guttural voice roared. The shadows in the room twisted and coiled, forming a dark, menacing figure. Sarah stood her ground, her voice steady. "By the light of the pure, I banish you. By the strength of the heart, I free this soul." The entity howled in rage, lashing out at Sarah, but the circle of salt held. She continued the incantation, her voice rising above the cacophony. The dark figure writhed and shrank, its power diminishing. With one final scream, the entity dissipated into nothingness. The room grew still, the air clear. Elizabeth and Clara appeared before Sarah, their faces serene and free of sorrow. "Thank you," Elizabeth whispered, tears in her eyes. "You have given us peace." Sarah watched as the spirits faded, the nursery returning to its dormant state. She felt a sense of calm wash over her, knowing that she had freed the Whitmore family from their torment. The next morning, as she walked through the townspeople greeted her warmly, their eyes filled with a newfound respect. The curse of Hollow Creek Manor was broken, and the town seemed brighter, lighter. Sarah returned to her writing, the inspiration flowing freely. She knew that the haunting of Hollow Creek was a story she had to tell, a story of sorrow, of redemption, and of the enduring power of hope. And as she typed the final words, she couldn't help but smile, knowing that she had made a difference, not just for the spirits of the past, but for the living as well. Thank you for watching, and see you soon for a next story. Comment below if you like or dislike for any reasons. Subscribe and active notifications.